Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Religion of Human Nature podcast. This is the beginning of season 3, the first episode, and the episode's going to be called Lending a Voice. I have two incredible guests with two incredible characters played in a memorable movie. Before I introduce them, and I'll let them introduce themselves as well, I do want to say that she doesn't know I'm going to say this, but one of the reasons I'm doing a podcast is because one of my first major interviews was with Linda Larkin. And she told me that I should do this for a living. I don't think my congregation was so thrilled about that comment, but I was, and it gave me a lot of confidence. So first I want to welcome Linda Larkin, who played the voice of Jasmine in the movie Aladdin. Hi, Linda, how are you?
Hi, Jeremy, thank you. And I meant it as a second job, not as you replacing your first job. I think you should definitely keep your calling, and adding this is perfection.
Fair. Okay. Yes, that's how we're going. And her partner in that film, maybe a little scarier, but still as important, the voice of Jafar, Jonathan Freeman. Jonathan, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
With the last name fine, it's easy to always be fine, exactly, no matter what.
I did want to say that, Linda Larkin gives a lot of people confidence to do things.
Well, that's good.
I've noticed that in the past.
That's a great... Yeah, that's a great...
How long have we known each other? Since 1991.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, you know me well. Thank you for saying that. That's really sweet. I don't know that anyone's ever actually said that before. And thank you, Jonathan.
Well, it's true.
Yeah, Linda, maybe you have a new... Linda has a new calling, maybe, too.
Oh, I don't know. What would it be?
Confidence giver.
Confidence
giver.
I can see the card now. Linda Larkin.
I love it.
I do feel sometimes like ideas just come through me. Like I say something because it just popped into my head, and I'm like, I was a vessel, a vehicle for this person to hear this thought that is just coming from somewhere and through me. So Jeremy, that was one of those moments.
I think it's good because you don't edit out that many things, and that's a good thing. It's always truthful, so it gives people confidence.
Yeah. Well, it's a great segue into our first question. Ready, Linda?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, so you have an iconic voice that many people know. What is it like to lend a voice to a character and make that character heard?
So the iconic voice, when I was a kid, I used to get teased about my voice. So for someone to say now as an adult that I have an iconic voice is such a 180 from how it was maybe perceived when I was younger. And I was having this conversation with a group of friends recently. We're doing a group of princess friends, actually. We were doing a podcast, and some kids were asking us questions. And I said one of the things for me was the thing that I got teased about was the thing that ended up really making me special later in my life. And someone said that really connected for them, that gave them hope that things that they struggled with as a kid might turn into something that was a benefit later. And that certainly was my experience. So for people to think of my voice in a positive way when I really got teased a lot. But I couldn't do anything about it. My voice was my voice. It wasn't something that I was putting on or, trying to change. And I think I had enough confidence in myself that I didn't try to change it just because that's what other people thought of me. I just accepted it, and one day it worked for me. And being able to be a part of the Disney family, being able to voice a Disney character, and in particular a Disney princess, was very, it felt like something that I was really training for my whole life. Even though I wasn't aware of it, I would sit in my room by myself with a record player reading along to Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, and I would read along to the characters over and over and over again. And to grow up and have an opportunity to actually do it for real was a blessing. I understand how fortunate I was to have that opportunity, and I really have never taken it for granted and have appreciated every moment of it over these 28 years.
That's beautiful. It's a beautiful story to find and follow things that are subconsciously maybe are in our childhood, and then move them, whether they're painful or even if they're wonderful, to move them into places to allow other things to empower people. And that's a beautiful story you shared about telling those kids. And I don't think there's many people who really know what they're supposed to do when they're really young, and to be able to find that through your voice is incredible. Jonathan, on the flip side, you played a role, but you played a villain. What does one's voice, how does it change how we view someone if someone's tone is different, or even demeanor and language? How does that change how we feel about an individual?
Well, I guess in the case of animation, which is what we're talking about at the moment, it's a huge part of the process. You know, it's a very collaborative process. It takes many years. It takes artists. It takes musicians, composers, writers, directors, et cetera, et cetera. And so being part of the collaborative process is very interesting to me. I mean, I like working in collaborative situations more than anything. Like I'm not the person you'll find sitting on a stool singing a song, you know, by myself in a club. That's probably not me. I love working in highly collaborative situations. So being able to use your voice, which I also have basically had since I was a kid. I didn't have a big vocal change thing. Like when I was like 8 years old, my voice pretty much sounded like this, except not like Jafar so much, but it was always. Yeah. So realizing that voice, you know, can be plugged into something that you can be a part of that's bigger than you are is really interesting. I mean, I always loved animation, like Linda. I didn't listen to Princess albums. My heroes were always the villains. I always loved the villains, and not because they were mean, not because they did horrible things, but I always liked the way they looked. They always had this certain cruel beauty that appealed to me. The scale of the characters, which is usually enormous, appealed to me, as I think it appeals to. And there are a lot of kids that appeals to, because they're big, they're powerful, they're, you know, the mean aspect of it is just, you know, one little aspect of the character. So, you know, having a voice to use, having been given a voice that comes in handy and that you can use. I mean, you know, look, probably when my life is over, if anybody remembers who I am, I'll always be connected to that character. As will Linda, as will most people that have done, you know, sort of these important characters. And so that makes me feel good. I don't care that it's a villain. In fact, I love that it's a villain. I took great pleasure in finding the nastiest way to play him, because I believe that without a great villain, you don't have a good story. You know, you have to have something to push against. You have to have something for the hero to overcome. You have to have something for the story to, you know, make it make sense and have some value in life. So I have a similar circumstance to Linda's, but just that it's a villain instead of a princess. I don't know.
I love that in real life, Jasmine and Jafar have always been good friends.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, I've been good friends with everybody. I'm good friends with my arch nemesis in the movie too, with Scott. So.
Yep. Yes. Oh. And Gilbert, our dear Gilbert.
Yes.
Yes. We all got to be together, Jeremy. I don't know if you knew this, but at the end of February, the last weekend of February into March 1st, which seems like a lifetime ago now, Jonathan, Scott Weinberg, Gilbert Gottfried and I were together in Richmond, Virginia, for the first time, the four of us together doing a live Comic-Con, doing an appearance like that, as outside of what we do to promote the Disney stuff. So it was really exciting. And then, you know, we all got home and we were like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have been in crowds of 20,000 people that weekend.
Yeah.
They're still planning on the GalaxyCon here. It's not until November. My kids are huge Fuller House fans. In fact, I have to pry the controller away from them when Fuller House is on. So they know very well who voices Aladdin's voice.
Well, since he's a personal friend, we'll make sure you get an introduction.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Cross our fingers that GalaxyCon happens this year.
Scott's a good interview too, by the way. I mean, he's
I would love that. He could talk about Love and DJ Tanner on on the episode to come. So what's the process like of voicing a cartoon? I mean, I know there's the recording in the studio, but how do you like prepare for that? Jonathan and Linda, were you looking at other princesses, villains in the past? Were you doing some research based on a specific character in the history of the world? How do you mold that sort of intentionality when you lend a voice?
Well, for me, on a technical level, working in a recording studio, was something that wasn't entirely new to me because I had been doing voiceover work in commercials in New York for probably 3 years before I did Aladdin. So that aspect of it, working with a microphone, hearing my own voice in my head, sort of disappearing into my imagination with a script in front of me was something that I felt very comfortable with. Working in animation, first time ever. It was a world that I was a fan, but it was my first time working in that area. And it was a little bit intimidating. We worked at the studio in Burbank, and I'd never been in a room that big. Whenever I'd been in a recording studio in New York to do a radio commercial or a television voiceover, I was in a little tiny studio with one engineer on the other side of the glass, maybe a couple of clients on the other side of the glass. This was a giant studio. You probably could have put an orchestra in that room, a small orchestra in that room. And on the other side of the glass were a lot of very intimidating people and some friendly faces. The directors and creators of Aladdin were always there and were such an incredible support and comfort for me, and, you know, good leaders taking me where I needed to go and making me feel like I could do it.
Jonathan, was your experience similar?
Yes, like I said a minute ago, I grew up like just loving all the Disney villains. So I actually wanted to be the voice of a Disney villain my whole life. So in a sense, it was something that happened. A wish came true for me. So that's something that I don't really understand fully how it happened. Maybe I wished myself into it. I don't know. But I could pretty much recite a list of almost every villain in the entire 50-year canon of Disney villains for you. And sometimes, in some cases, even the actors that played them, because I was very fond of them. And you actually would know a lot of them too, even though you don't know that you know them. But there are a lot of people that voice things that you would know from other projects, even the old voices.
Right.
So that's something I always wanted to do, and it was very exciting. At the time too, there was no, as Linda will attest, there was no phone patching. There was, there was none of this.
Right.
We got on an airplane and flew to Los Angeles, to the corner of Dopey Drive and Goofy Lane on the old studio lot, Studio B. That's true. That's what it is. Yeah. And it was not intimidating for me. I really relished it. I was so excited to be there because I was living a dream, and at the time I thought, gosh, it happened. I've got to really, enjoy this, and I did. And as Linda said, the people behind the glass screen were wonderful. We had great directors, two of them who were also the writers, great leaders. Working with Alan Menken was wonderful. I worked with Howard Ashman at the very end of his life before he passed away. I recorded, in fact, the last song that Howard and Alan wrote together that most people have never heard of before because it's not in the movie. It was changed to something else. So anyway, it was a big experience, and the experience has continued. I've been now, as has Linda, since 1992, when the movie was released, been traveling with an imaginary character, and he has, villain or not, he's done wonderful things for me, and I'm eternally grateful.
So we've talked about a little bit of lending a voice, or a lot of it about lending a voice inside the magic of Disney. I was actually there. One of the last things I did was took a class at Disney, and it was really cool. And it's just incredible to think. I got a little Nemo that I keep on my desk to remind me about everything that I learned.
Wait, what kind of class?
It was in quality service.
Oh.
So how they welcome people to their parks, and
Mm-hmm.
and through that lens,
Mm-hmm.
and even from like the garbage cans and how they're placed and why they're placed. It's just such a thoughtful environment. So I want to talk a little bit about now, as Jonathan, you put it so perfectly, that there's like character sort of behind you or on you at all times. And how do you now use that with you, right? in your pocket, maybe.
Yes.
So how do you then, when asked to lend a voice to, let's say, a charity, or to things that are happening in the Disney world, or even speaking on a panel, how do you lend your voice as the person behind such an important piece of cinematic history and certainly animation history? What's that responsibility like to actually lend a voice to things you care about and that you're passionate about, or that your agent and your cares about, that you're lending a voice to?
Well, do you want me to go, Linda, or do you want to?
Yes, you go.
Okay. Well, this is a pretty quick story. For me, it was an easy decision because Linda and I both had a wonderful press agent at Disney named Howard Green, and Howard, like sort of sets you up with, like, they wanted to get your bio, and Gary, he was the best person still at Disney in some capacity. And in my first meeting with Howard, he said to me, "You know what? Doing this role is going to change your life in more ways than you could possibly imagine." And of course, because it was the first time I'd done a voice for Disney, I knew it was going to be a big project because it had all these great people connected to it. In my very small actorly mind, I guess I probably thought to myself, oh, in more ways than I could possibly imagine, I'm going to get bigger projects and more projects. I'm going to do a lot more voices. And it was all me, you know what I mean? And in fact, a lot of those things did happen. And so, I was like accepting of it. And I was like, oh, Howard was right, And then one day I was walking down 8th Avenue with my friend Marilyn Cooper. We bumped into Jerry Orbach. And Jerry Orbach, as you may or may not know, aside from having a big TV career and film career, he also was the voice of Lumiere in Beauty and the Beast. And Marilyn said, hey, you two guys have something in common. We're both voices of cartoon characters at Disney. So I said, oh, I'm a big fan of yours, Mr. Orbach. I mean, Lumiere, great character, just fantastically realized, And he said, who are you? Which one are you? And I said, Jafar. And he was like, oh my God. He said, I think that might be my favorite. He was very complimentary. And he said to me, listen, this is going to change your life in more ways you could possibly imagine. This was years later. And It like hit me. I was like, wait a minute, I've heard that. And in fact, that's what happened. Years later, I was doing a Broadway show. I was doing Mary Poppins, in fact, on Broadway. And I got a note backstage from a writer named Ron Suskind, who has a son on the autistic spectrum. And he told me this whole story about how his son, Owen, taught himself how to speak and relearn how to connect to the world by watching Disney animated movies. He was an expert, a wizard. He knew every voice, character, you know. Anyway, so I got connected to the community. Ron wrote a book. There's a great documentary called Life Animated.
Incredible documentary. Everyone should see this documentary. It is so beautiful.
It is beautiful. And it was nominated,
right? It was nominated that year for an Academy Award, right?
It was nominated for an Academy Award in the documentary section. Anyway, so it became a big part of my life for a long time. And in fact, I am still connected to that community. There is not a holiday that goes by that I don't get a message from Owen or a text saying, hey, Jonathan, just, you know, happy Thanksgiving, you know, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever. He celebrates everything. So, so that has been it became a big part of my life. And then, as Linda will tell you too, I'm sure, I've been asked to lend my voice and my help to other charities. I work with a big charity in New York that's called Operation Exodus that helps underprivileged kids get tutoring. And anyway, it's just been great. And I could go on and on and on and on. So I'm going to let Linda talk about it because she has some great experiences too. It has been wonderful, and I consider it a privilege.
Oh, for sure. It's something. I agree with Jonathan. We didn't know in the beginning how our lives would be changed. I think we knew that we were a part of something really exciting and possibly classic and historical, but I don't think we knew all of the experiences that would open up because of that. And they continue to new things that I didn't even think were possible, like meeting people all over the world in person, hearing people that grew up with this movie, that were 5 years old and it was their first movie in the movie theater, and now they're 30 and they're telling us in person their experiences, what this movie and our characters meant to them, how maybe it helped them through a difficult time in their lives. These stories change me. I hear them and they stay with me. The people stay with me. It helps that we have social media. I stay connected with many of the people that I get to meet because we connect through Instagram or, you know, other ways. And it's really incredible that we have had a platform that has opened us up to bigger experiences, to being connected to people that I may have never gotten to meet before. I may have never gotten to hear their stories, and their stories are gifts to me. I just feel very blessed, and we bring each other into things all the time. Like last year, Jonathan had a friend who runs a program at a public school in Manhattan, and they're kindergarten and first graders, and they do a 2-year program. Maybe you can talk more about it, Jonathan. We went to this program because they're doing a version of Aladdin. Mm-hmm. It's really quite special. His teacher's incredible, and he brought Jonathan in, and Jonathan brought me in, and we got to sit with these kids and hear their questions and watch their process, be a part of their process, working on this production. It's a little interrupted. They're supposed to be doing it in person at the end of this school year, so that's been delayed, but we'll have a chance when they come back to school.
So, yeah, that's a crazy program. This is a teacher who realized that his school, it's public. Was it public school 212?
Yeah, 212. Yep.
The area code for Manhattan.
Yeah.
he has this great class that he shares with another teacher, and I guess one day he thought to himself, we're right in the middle of the theater district in Manhattan, and we are not connecting at all to these resources that are probably available to us. So he started investigating, and before you know it, he started this program, and every important composer lyricist, actor, and actress has been there to speak and to lend their help, voice, ideas, whatever they have to offer. And they're very short sessions, really, because these are young kids.
Right.
But these kids learn how to do everything in the business, from printing tickets and taking tickets at the door to writing the shows, designing the shows, and they do full-on like set design, costume design, lighting plots. They get 5 Broadway orchestra musicians to come and play the score, and they have a few kids that, you know, join in, but they have like a Broadway core to sort of move it along, and the kids do everything. Anyway, it's a great learning process. I you know, I can't say, and I said a little bit in the beginning about collaboration. I grew up in a children's theater in Cleveland, Ohio, and I think the thing that I'm realizing is that it doesn't matter if you become an actor or a director, or even if you're connected to the arts, but when you're working in those situations, you're forced to collaborate.
Right.
It makes you collaborate, not in a bad way, but it makes you understand how collaboration works, why collaboration is good, what it does for you, how it helps the show, because you collaborate this person, you could make a better costume, you could do a better job, you could sing the song better, you know, whatever it is. And that, I think, is probably the thing that's the most interesting and important to me about that program that Lynn was talking about, is that when you learn collaboration at an early age, it's something that it stays with you.
Right. You see the value in it at that age, and you seek that as you go through life. It's really neat. And I really loved how that teacher, it's a public school that just happens to be blocks from Broadway. And that teacher tapped into the community and brought the artists into the school. And it's a natural fit. It's literally right there in the middle of Broadway. And, you know, if he hadn't had that vision, I don't know that we would have, you know, marched to the door and said, hey, we're here to offer our help. Like, you really need someone with a vision to bring people in. And
I can tell you that the most important voices in show business have attended these classes for him. And all he does is write a letter and says, this is what I'm doing. I'd love it if you could come and speak to and everyone says yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's important. And he's built a certain amount of trust, right? That people know that when they work with him, that something special is going to happen.
Well, sure, if you get a list, and on the list are people that are like, you know, Stephen Sondheim, Bernadette Peters, Elaine Stritch, Alan Menken, you know, you're like, oh, I want to be on that list.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm hoping this podcast becomes, right?
Exactly. I think, you know, we are a community as artists, and I think we all bring each other into these things that inspire us. And it's really, you know, Jeremy, you and I talked about doing a podcast, and I said, let's bring in Jonathan. It's just what we do. We are a collaborative group, and we just automatically want to include each other in doing something that's valuable to us.
I think, though, I have to say, I credit my enthusiasm and my need to collaborate with people from an early age, from it being learned at an early age. And it's something that I don't know. I can't think how else I would have gotten that. How else I would have. I'm sure there are other ways, but looking back on my life of considerable years at this point, I have no idea how that would have happened without that.
Well, some people do it through sports.
Yeah.
Some people do it through the arts, like through religion as well, through your, you know, community activities. You can learn that. It's a great thing that we have to continue to promote, and especially for young people, because I really do think it gets in there and you want to continue it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth behind that, and how we how we gather together, how we come together and lend voice to that. I want to come to that in just one second. I think what you said about sports and about arts, these things are so important to the social dynamics and growth of, especially of our youth, so that when they go out in the world, they're not trying to take on the world by themselves, but they have a community around them and they know how to work with others, which is so important. I advocate for team sports with my children, and that's not to say they don't also do dance and art and stuff like that. Of course they do, but my experience was obviously in sports, so it makes it more relatable to me. I guess the last question I really want to talk about is, how do we know when and where to lend our voice to make an impact? I'm looking around today in the world. I think there's just a general lack of leadership, and how do we step up when, or and how maybe your experience, if you discuss some of these organizations, but how do you know that it feels right and when you're the right voice to step up and sort of speak on behalf or be a part of the collaboration?
I think for me, my intuition has always led. I think there's no wrong time to speak up and share what you believe. I think if you're following your heart and you're following your truth, it's the right time to add your voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody has a voice inside their head. And you have to learn to listen to it, maybe, I don't know. And it's the thing that, in an emergency makes you say, okay, and you do the right thing. It tells you the right thing to do when you really know how to do it. But maybe that's part of, learning too, is just learning how to access that voice and make sure that what you're listening to is the right voice. And I think what Linda said again is pretty correct. I think it becomes instinct, I think, in most cases. And I don't know. I mean, when you hear other people's stories, when someone comes to you and says, my son taught himself how to speak and relate to the world by watching Disney animated movies, and I wondered if you could call him on his birthday, and the next thing you know, you're making a documentary with, what I mean?
Yeah.
So in retrospect, when the voice has told you the right thing to do and when you've listened correctly. But in the moment, I think, like Linda said, I think you have to trust yourself. You have to trust your heart, and if there isn't a bad time to speak up.
Yeah, that's intuition is powerful, and choosing right from wrong is incredibly crucial right now to understand the person next to you and to lend voice where you can, and understand that sometimes your voice isn't needed. That's why I think that's why Twitter exists, or shouldn't exist, however we look at it. Is that I always say that if you're going to post something on social media, it should be nice and kind. And if you can't post something nice or kind, do you really need to scream it at the world? That we just have to be better people, all of us. Everyone's included in that. I want to thank you both. Jonathan, I know you were on Broadway. You want to tell us the show's on pause, I imagine?
Broadway is on pause. I mean, nobody really knows. I think any gathering place, meaning sports arenas, theaters, Broadway theaters are substantial in size. I think until they have a really good solution, not just for the audience, but also for, the performers. I mean,
Yeah.
where we work, and I work in a fantastic, beautiful theater called the New Amsterdam Theater, and it's spacious backstage, but not really. It's spacious
Right.
by Broadway theater standards, but you're still, and when you're on stage, when you're acting or singing, you're 6 inches from someone's face. There are people dressing you sometimes frantically for a quick change. There are people gluing things on your face and putting on, so there are people literally right here for most of the time that you're in the theater. And there's an orchestra, a live orchestra, and an orchestra pit is very close quarters. So it has to do with safety. And I think it'll be probably, unfortunately, a while. I don't know why. I mean, I'm not being pessimistic. I think realistically, though, if you really think hard about it, and even think about getting a ticket at the box office, and then you have to hand it to an usher who tears the ticket and hands you your it's all going to be rethought.
Yeah, so it's true. But I can't wait to get back. Now I have to see Aladdin on Broadway. I got to fly to New York.
Oh, Jeremy, you must.
The last show.
We won't be able to do the backstage tours anymore, but
yeah,
I think we can get you house seats, right, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's all going to change. I think. I don't know. Maybe they'll figure it out and everything will be fine and it'll go back to this way it was. But I don't know.
I don't know.
Awesome.
It's such a wonderful show. It'll be so great to see it come back. We know, as of now, it is coming back. It's just a matter of when. I've seen it twice.
Linda, do you have anything else going on in your life you want to share with people?
I am continuing to work for the organizations that I've supported over the years. The Guide Dog Foundation is an organization that I have a very strong connection to. I've raised 12 puppies for them. I have one of their retired, what do we call them, career change guide dogs, who's now 11. I've had her since the day she was born. So I'm continuing to work with them and with Give Kids the World and with the other princesses and my cast from Aladdin. And we're just really staying active and from our own homes participating in all of the things that we support.
That's beautiful. Thank you both so much for your time. I think this was a great discussion about how do we give voice to people, to things, and support using that voice. And it matters. Even if sometimes you're the villain or sometimes you're the heroine, what you say and how you say it and when you stand up is crucial. So I want to thank you both for your time and your energy, especially with what's going on in the world. I mean, I'm stuck at home for the most part, but there's still beautiful days, I'm sure, outside, and I appreciate the time.
Yes, Jeremy, thank you so much for bringing us together for this conversation. It really meant a lot.
Thank you.
Terrific. Nice to see you, Linda.
Nice to see you, Jonathan.
Nice to meet you, Jeremy.
Nice to meet you. So that